Hello everybody and welcome to part 3 of your GameMaker Studio networking tutorial. Let's go ahead and get right into it. So currently, as it is right now, here is our server. I just launched it, and let's launch a couple clients. So we'll launch our first one, and currently everything works just fine. We can connect to our server, we can move around, but the issue we're having now is if we log on a second client, they can't actually see each other. They're both connected to the server and everything's working good on that end. However, we've got to tell the server to actually create the other player on that person's client. That way they can see each other, they can see when each other moves, and so on and so on. So let's go ahead and get that going. So let's close all of this. And again, we have our client and we have our server. So the first thing we're actually going to do is make it to where the server and whoever's hosting the server can actually see the players on his screen as well. So in other words, we're actually going to draw out the players in this window. So to do that, we have to match everything perfectly. So the sprites should be the same size. So if we go to our client, our sprite player is 64 by 64. So in our server, let's go ahead and make a new sprite, and we'll name it Sprite Player. It's already 64 by 64, so let's go ahead and give it a color. Alright, now we're going to want to probably change the room color in room server because it's green and our player is green. So let's change that to a blue. Okay, so we've went ahead and added a sprite. Let's add a player object into the server. Oops, I added a room. Let's go ahead and add an object to the server, and we'll name him Object Player. And let's go ahead and assign him the sprite. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is go into our client and open up the room. And we want to delete the player here because what we're going to do is have the server create the player and the other players for each client. So just delete this object because we're not going to need it anymore. So the first thing we want to do is go into our con/server, and under your async networking, you're going to have this right here, the network type connect. Basically, whenever a player connects to the server, it runs whatever is in this code right here, from case all the way to break. So what we need to do is have this do a few things. First, it needs to create the player on the server, and then next, it needs to tell all the other players that you've actually connected. So let's go ahead and in our create event, create a couple variables. We'll say player spawn_x equals 100 and player spawn_y equals 100. So this is going to be wherever you want the player to spawn in the game world. It's going to be right here. So let's go back to our async networking, and then we'll just say instance create depth, and we'll say player spawn x and player spawn y. Then we'll say depth and then object player. So what this will do is spawn a player into the game world from the server side. So if we run the server, you can see that there are no players. But now when we launch a client, let's open up the server, a player is going to spawn in our server. But again, it's not on the player yet because the server needs to now tell the player that, hey, you're in the game world, go ahead and create the player on your end too. So also, when we close the game, let's close the client, the player is going to remain on the server because we also have to tell the server to delete this player specifically. Let's go ahead and do that before we actually tell the server to create the player on the client. So what we're going to do is create a, let's see, probably a map, and we'll just say socket to instance ID equals ds map create. Basically, what we're going to do with this DS map is we want to create a system where the server is storing all of the sockets of the player, and then based on whatever socket, we can get the instance ID of this object player. If you don't know about DS maps, you're going to want to look into that right now because it's very important. So socket to instance ID, and then under our create thing here, right under after we've created our object player, we're just going to say DS map add socket to instance ID. The key is going to be the socket, and the value is going to be the instance ID of this player. All right. And the reason we have to do that is because whenever the player disconnects, we actually want to delete that object from the game world. So under network type disconnect, we'll say with DS map find value. We want to say socket to instance ID, and then socket instance destroy. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. So basically, we're just storing the socket to of every player in a DS map. So when we input the socket, we're going to get the instance ID of the player. So then when the player disconnects, we can grab that instance ID and destroy it. So let's go ahead and test this code. We'll run the server. Okay, we'll run the client. And okay, so in the server, the player appeared, but now when the player leaves, it's going to delete. Very cool. While we're at it, let's go ahead and add movement because currently, well, actually, no. Let's make the player actually spawn in the client. Then we'll add movement. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a new enum and or enumerator. Before move, let's just say player / connect. And that's in the create event of our con server. And then in our client, under con client, we're going to add the same enumerator. Remember, these always have to match perfectly. So again, behind move, what we call it, player connect. Player connect, okay. And then back to our server and under async. So after we've created the player, let's say buffer seek server buffer seek start 0, and then buffer write server buffer. Let's do a buffer u8, and first we're going to send the socket of our player, and then we're going to say buffer write server buffer, and then we're going to do actually no, I think that's all we'll set. Actually, no. Yeah. Before the socket. By the way, sorry if this is a little bit sloppy. It's almost 1 a.m. while I'm doing this. So we're going to do buffer. How have we been doing these? I'm sorry. 1 second. How have we been doing these? As U8s. Okay. Okay, good. Okay, back to this. We're going to do the network.player connect. Okay, so we're starting at the top of our buffer, and then we are sending out the player connect, which again in the receive packet is, where we'll match that with a switch event. And then we are sending the socket of our player, and then we're just going to send this out to the player. Send packet, socket, buffer tell server buffer. Okay, so that's done. Now in our client, under scripts, under receive packet, before network move, we're going to add another case. So remember that message ID is going to be that player connect. So case network.player connect. We're going to say var / socket. We're going to say buffer read buffer, and then it was a buffer u8. And then we're going to say, oh, that's why I was trying to send other data. We want to receive the X and Y. We want to receive the spawn of the player. So go back to our server here, and after the socket, we're just going to, we can just copy this code just to save a little bit of time. Let's go ahead, and I pasted it twice. We're going to change the U8s to U16s, and then we are going to add /player dot, oh my goodness, if I could just type, our player X and player Y. Okay, so that will send the X and Y of the player we created in the server. Now let's go back to our client, and then we'll say var /x equals buffer read buffer U16, and var /y equals the same thing. I just wish I could type today. And then, okay, so we're grabbing that information from the buffer, and then we're just going to create our player. So var /player equals, oh my goodness, guys, I'm so sorry. I wish I could type. And then we'll just say x /y depth, and then object player. And player.socket equals socket. So that way, if we ever need to find the player that has this socket, we can do that. Okay, so let's go ahead and launch our server and then our client, and we should be good. So server is up and running. No clients connected to it. We're going to go ahead and launch our client now using F5. And okay, so now on our client, we are in the game world. Check that out. Isn't that cool? Awesome. So now the next problem is when we move our player around, the server does not see what's going on. So that'll be the next thing that we fix, and it'll actually be very easy to fix. In our server, open up receive packet, and then under move, after we've received our move X and move Y from the player, and before we send this information out, we're going to say with ds map find value socket to instance ID, and then the key will be socket. Actually, we'll do it this way. This way is way cleaner. Remove with, we'll just do this. We'll say var /player equals that. That's way easier. Then we can say player.x equals move X, and then player.y equals move Y. Cool? Okay, that's way easier, because remember, this will always return the instance ID based off that socket right there. And it should move it. So now if we run the server and then we run the client, again, you can click F5 to go ahead and do that. All right, we have our player connected. Now when we move, it's all going to sync up and match perfectly. Very cool. Okay, so this is all well and good, but again, if another client connects, they won't be able to see each other. Well, now that the server can see exactly what's going on and keep track of players, it should be not too hard to go ahead and connect other clients. So let's go ahead and close these and open our server. Actually, let's go over to the client first, and we're going to create a new sprite, and we're going to call this sprite SPR_slave. And let's give him a color. We'll just give him this brown color, just so we can differentiate. And then we're going to create a new object called object slave. Now, an object slave will be basically all the other players, and we can't use the object player for the other players. You don't want to do that, because then the object player will be responding to commands like global left pressed, and it will just create a mess. So you want a slave that's going to look and act like the other players, but not actually be the other players. Okay, so we have our object slave going. Now let's go to our server. Let's go to con server. And okay, so when a player connects, this code right here will send the player his data. now we want to tell all the clients that are already connected that somebody new has joined. So we are going to create another code very similar to this after this. So the first thing we want to do is in our create event, after player connect, we'll say player joined. And again, the purpose of this tutorial is to give you a good idea of how networking works. I'm not saying this is the best way to set up this system. I'll keep doing future tutorials. You can find as you're programming the best way to do things. This is just to kind of get you going. So player joined. So how we send data to all the clients at one time is pretty simple. We're going to say var I equals 0, and then we're going to say repeat, and then we're going to say ds list size, and we're going to say socket list. So remember this guy right here, we add all the sockets that join into this list called socket list. And remember, sockets are that unique ID we use to send packets to the other connected players. So we're going to repeat the size of this list, and then we're going to say var _, we'll just say sock equals ds list find value, and we'll say socket list, and we'll say I, and if sock does not equal socket, which is again the connected player at this point, then we're basically going to send a code very similar to this. So I'm going to copy this, I'm going to paste it right here, and then we'll just edit it to however we want it to be. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is say player joined. And then we want to send the socket of that player, and then we want to send its X and Y. So there's not a lot different going on other than this, when it hits the client, is going to create a slave instead of an object player. So go to your client now, and under con client, under the create event, after player connect, say player joined, comma, and then under receive packet, after player connect, we'll say case network dot player joined break. And again, it's sending all the same data, so you can actually just copy this whole thing right here, paste it, okay? And then really all we're changing is object player to object slave. And then what we're going to do is, just to keep our code kind of neat, we'll just change this variable name to _slave, just so we know what's going on. Alrighty. So now if we create an executable as a zip, we'll put it on our desktop. And now when we actually connect two clients, they should, well, they won't be able to totally see each other, but we'll keep going from there. So let me just show you what's going on right now. We'll go ahead and extract it. Now we'll run our server by clicking F5, and then we're going to open tutorial client. Let's open up one client, and okay, we can move this client over here. Now, pay close attention to the client on the right. This is the one that's already connected. When we open up a new client, the new client can see basically right here. Actually, no. Wait. Let's close these. I think I made a mistake. Let's close these. Let's close our server. Under our server, after this, we'll say I plus equal 1, because we need to be incrementing this I. Yeah, so now let's relaunch the server, and let's relaunch the clients and see what happens. Now I'm not 100% sure of anything. Okay, we have client 1 on the right, we have client 2. It's still doing about the same thing. So the second client that logs in can see that there is a slave, that there is someone else connected, but it's not doing exactly what I predicted it would do. So let's figure that out. Okay, I figured it out pretty quickly. the server, again, this, where it says network pack send, instead of socket, it needs to say sock. Again, because this was just repeatedly sending this to the connected player. So, okay. Hopefully, all of our bugs are fixed. Let's run the server again. Now it should do what I predicted it to do. Let's open up our first client. So this first client should actually be the one that sees the connecting client. It was the other way around. But now let's go ahead and open up. Yeah, there we go. There we go. That's what's happening. So, yeah. The first client that was connected can see all the other clients that connect, but the client that connected can't see the clients that were already connected. So let's keep coding. Let's make sure that this client that connects afterwards can see the other players that are already in the game world. Okay, let's go ahead and close everything down. Let's keep on coding. So basically what we want to do is before this code, which tells all the players already connected that your new player just joined, we want to tell the new player who just joined that there are other players in the game world, and we want you to see it. So we will just basically say var I equals 0. We'll repeat ds list size socket list. Okay. Make sure this time we increment that I by 1. And it's going to be a very similar code to all of this. So, but a little bit different. So basically, we're just going to copy this, paste it here, and then we're going to say, first, let's change this sock to socket, because this is sending it to the client that just joined. And I'm trying to think if I need this or not. No, yeah, I actually do need that. So we're going to say before this buffer seek, we're going to get var _slave equals ds map find value socket to instant ID. This thing is so useful. And then we're going to say sock. So we're getting the instance IDs of all the other sockets that are already connected, except ours. That's what this is all about. So it's going sock equals, from our socket list. And if it's not us who just connected, then let's go ahead and get the instance ID of our slaves or our other clients that are already connected. And let's send that socket ID. And let's send slave X and slave Y. Again, this is where we're getting the instance ID. Let's send that to the client right here that just connected. So I know this is advanced stuff, but this is something you can set up, begin to play with, find better ways of doing it, and keep going from there. So that should be it. Let's go ahead and run our server. Launch the first client. Move you over here. Let's make this smaller so I don't have to deal with it. Launch the second client. Okay. Now we both see each other. So you can see this client sees this guy as a different color because here's the player. And this guy also sees him as a different color because here's the player. Now they can't see each other walk around. And that's just because we need to change our code a little bit in the server. But they do see each other now. Again, one thing that's not happening is when we leave, let's close this guy. They're not destroying each other. Again, we have to tell the server to send all of this data. But one thing we can go ahead and do is add walking into the game. So let's go ahead and close all this. Let's go to our server. Let's go to receive packet. And let's make it to where the players can see each other move. And it's very similar to what we've already been doing with the var I equals 0. We'll repeat ds list size socket list. Make sure we increment that I hate when I forget to do that because it just messes everything up. And var _sock equals ds list find value socket. Oh my goodness. List I And then we'll take this code, cut it, paste it after this, right in between the incrementation of I and after where we get this sock. And we'll replace socket with sock. Okay, we're also going to add one more thing here, a U8. We're going to add socket. This is the socket of the player that's moving, okay? And so we're saying this socket, whoever this object is with this socket, make sure you move him to X and Y. That's what we're going to do in the client. So go over to your client, go to receive packet, and under move, make sure you add this new /sock, and then we're going to make sure that that is a U8. And basically, we need to add a DS map. We need to do something very similar that we did over in the server, that socket ID to instance ID. So go to your con client, and under create, you're going to say socket to instance ID equals DS map create. Make one of those. And then I might as well go ahead and make the text a little bit bigger for everybody. I should have did that at the beginning, but so socket to instance ID. Under your receive packet, under network player connect, you're going to say DS map add what was it, socket to instance ID. Then you're going to say the key is what? /socket, and then the value is player. So we're putting the instance ID of our player when we first connect into this map. We're just going to copy and paste that here after player joined, but we're going to change this to slave. So we're putting the socket of our slaves also in this giant map. So the player, instance ID, object player, and then all the object instance IDs of object slave all go in the same map. So we know who we're supposed to move. So under network move, we have this socket. So hopefully you guessed it. We can say /player or slave, whatever you want to call it, DS map find value socket to instance ID sock. And now whoever player is, now this could be an object player and this could be an object slave. That's why it's like, you could name it inst if that'll be less confusing. But it is a player. So /player, and then you're just going to change this from object player to player. So whether this contains you as the player or a slave, it's whoever the socket is. So now when we do a build, create executable as a zip, and we'll just name this 4. Now the players will be able to see each other walk around. So let's extract. Let's run our server by clicking F5. Go to our new client. 4. No, was that it? Yeah, 4. Okay. Let's add one client in. Let's go ahead and move him down here. Let's add a second client. So you can see they can see each other. But now they can see each other move. Come on. Isn't that cool? That is awesome. Now, notice they're not syncing, and that's because we can go to our client, probably because of this. Yeah. So under your sprite slave, make sure that this is middle and center, because this is also middle and center. So these have to sync up perfectly. That's why these aren't synced perfectly. But they can see each other move. Make sure also in your server, yeah, see this should also be middle center. My bad. Make sure all those are middle center. But it works. But again, when we close everything, we can't see each other leave the server. So go to your object server, or I mean your server thing. A couple things we want to do. Let's go to our disconnect. We want to make sure that just like we're deleting the socket from the socket list, we're also removing the socket IDs from that map we created. So DS map delete me make this a little bigger. DS map delete socket to instance ID, and then we're going to say socket. So this will delete that instant ID from this DS map, so that frees it up for a new player to connect after someone else is disconnected. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is say, before we delete it from the server, now this is where we delete the object player from the server. After that, we want to probably go to our create event first, and after player joined, we'll say player disconnect. Okay, that's before moved, after join, player disconnect. Then we want to basically, I guess we could just copy and paste this code, or just do it from scratch. Var I equals 0, repeat all the sockets, socket list, DS list size, socket list. Make sure we're incrementing that I by 1. And again, just basically buffer seek server buffer seek start 0. And then we're going to say buffer right. See, you can see why I just copy and paste this code a lot, because you just can. Player disconnect. Okay. And then we need to say what socket is disconnecting, which I'm just gonna copy and paste this so you don't have to see me write it. So a buffer U8 and then the socket. That's the socket that is disconnecting from the game world. And then we can just what can we do here? We can basically, we got to make sure we do this. Var /sock equals DS list find value socket list I. So it's going through all the sockets that are connected, and then we're sending the socket, and then network send packet. Setting it to sock. Again, you can just copy and paste a lot of this code. And the good thing about copy and pasting is you won't make little misspells. Like, what if I put an F there and then I'm running it, trying to figure out a code? So copy and pasting a lot of this just makes everything easier. Okay, so let's now, again, make sure this is under network type disconnect. This is now sending all the clients, letting them know that a player at this socket, get the socket right here, has just left the game, so go ahead and delete him from the game world. Go to your client, under client, after player join, player disconnect. Make sure you put a comma there. Receive packet, under player joined, and before moved, we'll say case network dot player disconnect. Add a break, var /socket equals buffer read buffer, and then it was a U8. And this is where this DS map comes in handy once again. Var /slave, I'm sorry, player equals DS map /player equals DS map find value. And it's that socket to instance ID and socket. So this is the instance ID of the player that's disconnecting. So we'll just say with /player destroy. And then we want to say DS map delete socket to instance ID socket. So we want to make sure that that's cleared from our DS map. And that's it. So now if we create an executable as a zip, let's just name it number 5. Now it should work. So now we've covered a lot of things in this video. We've covered syncing the server, we've covered movement, and now we are covering even disconnecting. So let's go ahead and run the server by clicking F5. And then we'll run our first client. He joins just like a champ. Let's move him down here. Let's connect actually move him over here. Let's connect the second client. and they can, again, both see each other just fine. And now you don't have that issue where they weren't in sync. They should work perfectly. And everyone works. So I'm going to close this client on the left, so we should see this disappear. And it works, and we got an error. And that error is with our server. So it's saying something's going on. So let's go to our server. Let's open up con server and see what's going on. It's at line 71. What's going on with line 71? Oh, let's see. So what's happening is this DS map delete. We need to move this to the bottom of our script because it needs to delete this instance ID, and we remove that instance ID from the map before it could call it and then delete it. So now all we have to do, we moved it to the bottom. Make sure you move this DS map delete under your network type disconnect to the bottom. Now when we run the server and the clients, it should work with no errors. So client 3, another client. Okay, so everyone should see each other now. So again, I'm going to close this client on the left, and so this guy right here should delete with no issues, and it deletes from the server. And everything works. So I'm going to try to close both clients and open up new clients, make sure we have no errors there. Everything works, guys. Check that out. Doesn't that just make you so happy? So in closing, let me just let you know what's going on with this. So basically, anytime you want to send data to all the clients at once, it's this right here, this var I equals 0, and you repeat, you go through the socket list, you get the socket using that I variable. Again, make sure you increment it every time. Getting that I variable, you're going through the socket list, and then when you do a network send packet, you are sending it to that socket. So it's just a repeat, it's just a loop. You're just flying through that DS list, sending it to all the clients. So this goes the same with shooting. This goes with anything you want to do. If you want all the clients to see it, when the player does it, you've got to repeat this DS list. If you only want a certain client to see it, make sure you specify which client exactly you want to see it. So I hope this video helped. Please forgive me if I was a little bit sloppy. This was very impromptu. I know you guys have been begging me for a part 3. So here it is, and it's also very late, and this was the only time that I had to make this video. So I do apologize with any sloppiness. Normally I rehearse these videos like 5 times. It normally takes me 3 hours to make a video just so I can make sure it's perfect and it wastes as little bit of your time as possible. I know this was kind of deep and kind of advanced, and I would love to help you any way that I can. You can join my Discord server if you have any questions, or leave a comment, or follow me on Twitter at Wizardy. All those links are in the description of this video. Let me know what you guys want to see next for a part 4. I'd love to keep going into this. I could show you how to set up a login server, how to set up accounts, better movement. There's many things I can show you. I want to make sure that you really understand what's going on with this. I can even go more in depth and explain again what's going on in another video. Please let me know by leaving a comment. Other than that, thank you guys so much for your support and your patience for part 3. I really appreciate you guys. If you're not doing it already, follow me on Twitter. I'm making an MMORPG with GameMaker, and you can follow that. It's called World of Zania. It's a lot of fun. But anyway, that about does it for me in this video. Thank you guys once again for watching, and I'll see you next time.